Welcome to Silverdale's new podcast. This is a new form of communication. We're starting to share the stories, ideas, and conversations that shape life here at Silverdale Baptist Academy. This podcast is designed to share the life, mission, and heart of our academy. It's a busy world, and it's so hard to get everyone in the same room, but this new podcast is a way to connect with our families wherever you are through meaningful conversations about faith, learning, and student life. Each of our episodes will highlight the people, programs, and ideas that make SBA unique, while also seeking to equip parents with insights and tools to help their children thrive. Our hope is that these conversations will strengthen the partnership between the school and the home and the church, that three-legged stool that Ms. Hansard talks about, as we work together to help our students think critically, love sacrificially, and live biblically. Today, we are joined by Ben Schoening, the current campus pastor of Silverdale Baptist Church, Appleton, licensed family counselor, and formerly the pastor of marriages and families here at Silverdale Baptist Church. Welcome back, Pastor Ben.
Thanks so much. You know, shocker, we talked a long time last time. You and I didn't run out of words.
No, that typically is not our problem, is it? I know our wives would maybe complain about that from time to time, but it's great for podcasting. Last time we talked a lot about Deuteronomy 6. We talked about training our children to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. You really touched on identity. I love some of the practical strategies you gave, and even the challenge to execute on those strategies, and how strategy is only as good as its execution. So as I reflected on that conversation, I thought back to 1 Peter 2:9, where Peter really gives us a one verse answer to the question, who am I? And even builds on that to say, what are we here for, right? He says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. What a beautiful picture of who our children will become if they will trust in the Lord Jesus. So just to maybe build on that idea of rooting our children's identity, because eventually we may do everything we can to help them root their identity in Christ, but they have to make that choice for themselves, right?
Man, I'll never forget when Connor, our oldest one, he would have been days old at this point. I'm holding him in his bedroom, right? We're home from the hospital. And I'm holding him, you know, he's days old. I'm holding this little child, and it dawned on me at some point his faith has to be his own. At some point he's going to have to make the decision to follow Jesus on his own. I don't get to decide that for him. And it was this very holy moment, right? Now I'd love to say, and I'll just say this as kind of a sweeping statement for the two conversations now that we're having. Anytime I'm speaking on parenting or even marriages, I'm sometimes concerned that people will assume that I think that I have it all together. And I feel like I can talk more about marriage principles and parenting principles because of my failures more than my successes, right?
Well, if you want to know I'm a failure, you just ask my kids.
Right.
And ask my wife. They can
and I
clearly
was
tell
say,
you that I got all kinds of
You've been
issues.
around me enough to know I mess up and I fail.
And
so
likewise.
Clearly I don't come in presuming that I have all the answers here. But again, there was this holy moment in a fearful moment, right? A fear-filled moment. I'll say it like that, in that I have to, like we talked about last week too, I need to point my children in the direction that God is calling them, that he is raising them up to be. And so when I think about 1 Peter 2:9, you know, that first statement that's made, Peter makes, you're a chosen generation. Do I really believe that? Do I truly believe that about each of my children, that they are chosen, that God perfectly and intricately designed them in such a way that will please and purpose his kingdom for eternity? Do I really believe that? Because if I really believe, if I take the time to really believe, and again, I don't do this enough. I don't take the time to really consider the fact that each of my children, each breath that they have is ordained by God. It also says in Psalms that every single one of their days were written in his book before one of them came to be. Every single one of them. So every single moment of my children's life are purposed and planned for his kingdom. So do I really believe that they are chosen? Do I really believe that they are of royal heritage, that they are part of the royal priesthood? Do I treat them like that? I mean, this, we could get into marrying the marriage principles really quick here. Do I really treat my wife as if she's royalty? Do I really treat my kids as if they're royalty? Do I take time to really, really consider the implications of what this verse is saying?
Yeah, when you were talking about Connor, kind of that holy moment, it reminded me, I'll never forget, I was traveling from Chattanooga back to Dayton, in Ray County where we were living at the time, just a little bit north of here. And I was on Highway 27, and
if you're listening from out of state, those are counties in Tennessee. People,
yes,
I did.
That's exactly right. Yes,
I'm still learning.
You're from California. Right. We do everything we can to help you, but we do our best. So I'm on U.S. Highway 27, traveling north out of Chattanooga, and I call my dad. We had just found out that Julie was pregnant with our oldest, and I call my dad on the phone, and kind of this moment that I'm proud, like, man, I'm going to be a father. I'm calling my dad. I'm so excited. So I call him on the phone, and I will never forget what he said. So I get finished telling him, and he says, "Congratulations, you and Julie have created a soul that will never pass away." Wow. And that was it.
Wow.
I didn't know if he was excited or not. I mean, he just leveled me with that statement, and I felt that on a soul level, like, hey, Maddox is never going to pass away. Now, physically he will, of course.
Sure, right.
Death is a life, happens to all of us, right?
Yeah.
That's a life principle.
But your dad was very intentional about saying a soul.
Right.
He didn't say a body, he didn't say a person. He was very intentional, very strategic about saying a soul that will never pass away.
And it's changed our prayer life.
Sure.
It's changed what we think about our other two children. It's changed what I think about other children, as a school administrator, but as a friend, as an uncle. It has radically changed the way I look at children, because there is something about the fact that this soul is going to face.
Sure.
It's going to stand in judgment. And I have a role in shepherding that soul. A role for which I'm going to be held accountable for.
Yep.
Which, as you say, that holy moment, it has fear in it. So if we really do believe that they are of a chosen race, if we really do believe that they are of royal priesthood, that they're a chosen generation, how does that shape the way we treat them? What does that mean for the relationship I have with my child?
Yeah. I do think maybe one practical way that we can view our children is that we are raising disciples. We are raising disciples to follow Jesus. And this goes back to any kind of discipleship principles we've learned. In order for me to raise disciples or lead disciples or train disciples, I have to be a disciple myself, right? And fortunately, there are so many great resources in books out there about discipleship training, but discipleship starts in the home, right? I'm raising these disciples, these followers of Jesus. And so that's going to start with, do I do that myself? And that can be another podcast, I suppose. But it does, or it should cause us to consider how and where we are leading these little disciples that we're raising.
Well, when you say the word disciple, I think about the not so popular root word for disciple, which sounds a lot like discipline. Mm-hmm. So at some point, I've got to tell my child that no, they can't do what they want to do, or yes, they need to do what I want them to do instead of, what they might want to do.
Yep.
And sometimes there's some consequences involved that aren't so fun. How do I do that? That is less about me, because I got to be honest, there's been lots of mistakes. I mean, you mentioned this a minute ago. Probably the mistakes that I have often made in raising my children has been that even in the discipline of them or in the handing out of consequences, that has been self-centered.
Yeah.
It's been about me. right? Not about, hey, I'm interacting with someone of royal birth that needs to become who they were created to be with purpose to glorify God with their life. Sometimes I'm not disciplining with that mindset. So help me.
Well, and you used a good word in place of discipline. You said consequences. I might say punishment. Oftentimes, my punishment has been anything but strategic. It's been ill-affected or ineffected in this way. And so I suppose I would posit that discipline, if we're looking at it through a biblical lens, is only positive, right? Now the consequences of the punishment that we dole out, oftentimes that can be negative because, like I said, we're more often than not, we're acting less out of a place of strategy and more just kind of in the place of a moment or adrenaline or whatever it might be. And this goes back to even what we talked about last time too, in strategic parenting. Am I strategic in my disciplinarian methods? So we go back to God, right? Who, perfect father, and he tells Adam the rules. And it's one rule. It's just one rule. He tells Adam, do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will die. So God tells him the rule. He also tells him what the consequence will be. But then what ends up happening when Adam and Eve do fall and they do eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, God doesn't freak out. He doesn't go off the rails. He doesn't lose his mind. He doesn't have to go back and apologize and say, hey, I gotta punish you. I gotta give you the consequences, but I'm sorry. I overreacted. I've had to do that many times with my kids. I've had to go back to them and say, hey, I overreact. We got to address this, but I overreacted because I wasn't prepared for your failure, right? God was prepared for it. He didn't overreact.
Which is interesting because he cursed all of mankind. I mean, the consequences were not like, right, hey, tomorrow you'll feel better. Like
with the curse of death, no, and he told Adam beforehand, right? And so it still is going to go back to these strategic principles. Why am I won't even include everyone else. Why am I surprised when my kids mess up? Now here's what I've said about my kids, and I suppose we can have. I'm willing to have a discussion to pick this apart, but I say it like this: I trust my kids. I don't trust their sin nature, right? I love my kids, and so I of course I want to think the best of them, and I trust that they are a chosen generation. They're a royal priesthood. They're a holy nation. They're people called that out of this darkness into His marvelous light. So I trust it, but I don't trust their sin nature.
Yeah, but you also don't. Let me just pick at that for a second. You don't also expect them to sin, right? You might not trust their sin nature, but you're saying like, hey, take out the trash. I've told you 1,000 times. So now there's going to be a consequence because you're not moving in obedience. And that's a really simple example, sure, right? That I probably would not cause many families out there much angst, but it is. So let's just say simple disobedience. Are you expecting your child to disobey? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. I mean, I lied. I lied to my parents. Why would I expect that my kids wouldn't lie to me? And so when I catch them in a lie, yes, it's shocking, especially because so many of the lies are so petty. It's so silly. It's so stupid what we're lying about. But I did the same thing. When it shocks me, when I'm caught off guard, what it kind of implies is I was expecting perfection, right? What it also indicates is I wasn't prepared for any kind of consequence, right? I wasn't prepared for, now what am I going to do about this, right? And that's okay. It's okay to have to go back and say, hey, stay in your room for a few minutes. Mom and I got to talk about what the consequences are going to be, right?
Maybe that's part of my problem is sometimes I'm levying consequences so quickly.
Well, and we're constantly, and I'll walk through kind of this model of discipline that I've talked about and taught. But we're constantly writing checks with our mouth that we can't cash.
Oh man,
right?
I've done that 1,000 times over.
Well, so this model or kind of this acrostic, if you look at the word fear, right? And fear is important because we are in a culture that we are far more permissive in our parenting styles. Back in the day, we had the three common parenting styles. You had authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive, right? And that permissive style, that was almost kind of the bottom one. More parents struggled with the authoritarian and the authoritative, right?
Oh, I remember being afraid of my friends' parents.
For sure.
Much less my own parents.
100%. But the overly permissive parenting style has become more prevalent, right? Where parents are more like friends to their kids than they are parents to their kids. And so there is this there's triangulation that happens. There's this notion or this belief that from a teenager or child's perspective is I'm on the same level with my parents. And from that is entitlement. So all that's to say we've lost the sense of fear. Well, when we consider the fear of God, we certainly as a culture have lost the fear of God.
Yes, and unfortunately, Proverbs, right away in Proverbs 1, the beginning of wisdom.
It's fear of God. Fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. Correct. We call God the big man in the sky, the big guy in the sky,
baby Jesus
upstairs.
Right.
It is the mercy of God not to strike us down, not to just immediately cause us to drop dead when we belittle Him in that way. It is so great that I can't even comprehend how merciful and how gracious He is to us. We don't, what I love. You have the Apostle John, right, in the upper room when the Jesus has washed their feet and they're eating a meal, and Jesus says that one is going to betray them, and they're all kind of talking, man, who is it, right? Who, and they look at John like, hey, you ask him, right? Because John's his beloved. They have this bond, they have this connection. And so it says that John leaned against the chest of Jesus, right? They had this closeness, they had this intimacy that John could lean his head against the chest of Jesus. Juxtapose that with, go to Revelation, and John, or Jesus reveals himself to John.
Right.
And this is the same Jesus that he was able to lean his face against, but it says that he fell at his feet as if he was a dead man, right? He sees Jesus, and there is this awe and this fearfulness of God that John did not have. His reaction was not, let me go hug him and put my cheek to his chest. It was, I'm going to fall on my face before him because I'm a dead man. What in the world am I to do, right? We have lost that fear of God. And once we just meditate on that and ponder that just for a moment, it brings us to a place we really need to be at more regularly, is I am completely subjugated to the favor and the mercy and the kindness and the grace of God for the next breath that I have, right? So we want to instill a holy fear and a good fear, a healthy fear with our kids. In the same way, like my dad's 76 years old. I love my dad. I would not cross him. I wouldn't. My dad, he never beat me. He never cursed me. He didn't belittle me. There was none of that stuff. It's a healthy fear that we are to have for our parents, and our kids need to have a healthy fear. I say this to parents with young kids: if you don't have a look that you can give to your son or daughter that stops them in their tracks, that they realize, oh, I'm getting the look right now, that this isn't a good look, then you got to develop some things, right? And so when we look at that word fear, F-E-A-R, we can spell that out and then glean some strategies from that. So F would be flexibility, meaning I have to add more to my discipline repertoire than just a spanking. I can't just rely on a spanking all the time.
Which would be culturally frowned upon anyway.
Really, can we...
that's the honest truth.
We're in the South.
Fair. That's fair, but
no, I hear you.
But you talk about authoritative parenting earlier. The spanking has kind of gone down by the wayside a little bit too. But to your point, there are other tools in the tool belt.
Right. But corporal punishment, I think it's fair and effective, especially when we are trying to teach them the cautions of danger. Right. If the real little kids and they're about to run across the street, a spanking within reason. And not where I'm still outraged and still angry reasonable.
Well, certainly, and I think I agree with you, particularly in the case of rebellion. I've said not to cross the street. You looked at me,
right,
and then you went across the street anyway.
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
I mean, that type of defiance and rebellious. Again, back to Scripture, the rod of discipline drives rebellion from the heart of the child.
Yep.
Right.
So there is a time and a place for that, but it's not every time, right? And then the concern is that's all I got. All I got is a spanking. So your kids get older, and it does reach a point by the time they're 9 or 10. Especially, I mean, it's ridiculous to even say this, but especially when they're hitting puberty and there's more meat getting put on their bones, spanking is really going to be ineffective. Listen, I love my mom, sweetest lady in all of the land. My older brother and I, we would fake like her spankings hurt, and she knows this. If she ever listens to this, she knows this. We
this isn't news to her. This,
right.
Yeah.
But we would kind of ask for a spanking because we would fake like it hurt, and then we'd get to go.
And
play,
it's over,
right?
Yeah.
And it's over, right? A timeout or taking away a toy was much worse. So just give a spanking. We'll pretend. And because my mom was so sweet, that really, she hated hurting us, right? So we were. I probably need to do some.
You were
more
torturing
repenting.
her.
I need to do repenting. Let's move on. Let's move on. So flexibility. I have to add more. I got to be more creative. I have to be willing to outwit my kids, and we don't want to become sinister. We don't want to sit here and think of, man, what are some ways that I can figure out how to torture my kids? But we really do have to consider what is going to affect them. I remember working with she was a single mom, and her son was 17, and again, it's just she's a single mom. She's working hard. She's doing a lot.
She's doing her best. She's
trying
really
her best.
Yeah.
But I mean, her kid he's disobedient and defiant constantly, and she can't put him over her knee. There's only so many times. This is several years ago, so there's only so many times. Video games really for him wasn't a thing. One of my suggestions to her was, he parks on your driveway, right? You own the home. He doesn't pay. He's 17, right? He doesn't pay rent. He shouldn't have to or anything like that. But, one morning, what if you just went out and now you have an air compressor. I made sure that all the tools were there. But what if you just deflated the air in his tires, right? Frustrate his life a little bit. Again, we're not trying to torture, but in a way that he's frustrating your life and making your life really difficult, he needs to experience that. He needs to experience what his actions and his behaviors are doing to you in a way that's going to resonate with him. Now, of course, he's not going to like it. The Bible says no one finds discipline to be enjoyable or pleasant at the time. But if it's being used, and we'll talk about this in a second, we have to be willing to kind of outwit and outsmart. I have found with two of my older kids who drive, a leverage that I have is a spot in the garage, right? And so if their room isn't clean, they don't get a spot in the garage. Now, what I'm also learning is we're in the temperatures are going up, and so it's not that big of a deal. I'm kind of losing a little bit of that leverage. I got to figure out something else, right? If for those of us that have access to our routers, right, turning off the Wi-Fi, that's a great tool that we can use. If video games is a thing for them, taking out the power cords, right? So the TV's there, the gaming system there, but removing the power cords. And again, we're not trying to torture them. In fact, what we want to be able to say is, hey, when you lie, here's what's going to happen. It's what, and then when they do lie, when they do disobey, when they do defy, we aren't losing our mind. We're not in this place of adrenaline filled rage. We have a plan. We have a strategy. We have to figure out what it is that's going to motivate each of our kids, because every single behavior is motivated by something. None of us do anything for nothing. We're always doing something for a reason. Even if subconsciously we don't know what's motivating us, we're doing it for a reason. So we got to be flexible, right? But then also we get to the E, we have to educate. Discipline can't just be, I'm just going to punish you just to punish you. I'm going to correct you just to correct you. What am I trying to teach you, right? I mean, you know this, as you've coached far longer than I have. Good coaching tells athletes what to do more than what not to do, right? I not too long ago, listening to a coach who, young soccer player, this kid is a good athlete, but never played soccer before, did something, crossed the ball in front of the goal rather than kicking out. And all the coach said was, "Hey, don't." Well, this is his first soccer game ever. Don't what? You're not telling him what to do. You're just telling him what not to do. I liken it to this. There's so many people that I meet with, and this goes back to what we talked about last time in terms of the foundation of parenting, the Shema, right? The daily reminders to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That's what I need to do. So oftentimes in our discipline or in our punishment, we're focusing on the negative behavior, which we have to do. We have to stop.
But it can't be the whole thing, right? It can't be all of it.
Correct, because that doesn't automatically mean they're going to know what to do. There's so many people that I talk with that will say, well, I grew up with really dysfunctional or broken homes, so I know exactly what not to do. Well, no, you don't. Or just because you know not to do that doesn't mean you know what to do, right? I always give the example as if all I ever eat my whole life is Twinkies, and you come to me and you say, "Ben, Twinkies aren't good for you. Don't eat Twinkies." Okay, but if you don't tell me what to eat, I'm going to go grab a ding dong, right? I'm going to go.
Same thing.
I'm going to go, but it's not a Twinkie. Right. You told me not to eat this. Right. I'm going to go do that, right? And so there has to be something we're teaching them. We've known this, man. Psychologists have revealed this to us since the 70s, that positive reinforcement is a far better indicator for shaping behavior than punishment, right? Again, we have to punish. I'm not saying we don't punish. I'm not promoting permissive parenting. We have to punish. We have to correct, but we also need to positively reinforce. So if we think about the word discipline, we relate it back to discipleship. Not only am I thinking about, okay, what are the consequences when my son or my daughter does something you're not supposed to do? What are those consequences going to be? I also need to think, and in some ways be more creative with, what are the consequences going to be when they actually do what I've asked them to do?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that very thing, the to reward and celebrate when we see our children embracing the things we've been training in them, yep, or the things we desire in them. That's just as powerful as...
So organizational leadership principles will tell you that you increase employee morale, you increase employee productivity, right? And so little small reinforcements that you can give in the workplace, right? Every employee knows rationally that they can't get a raise every week, right? No employee expects a raise every week, but what an employee is far more apt to be familiar with is if their boss says, "Hey, come in my office, I need to talk with you." That is not a good feeling, right? They know they're about to be punished. Why don't we reframe that narrative in terms of boss saying, "Hey, I need to talk with you. I want to affirm you. I just want to give you a good boy, an attaboy," right?
And that works with our children as well.
Exactly. It works with our children. I mean, it doesn't, again, I don't want us to fall prey into this thought of, okay, if I'm constantly having to positively reinforce and I got to get this little sticker chart and I got to get these toys and I got to get this stuff. It doesn't always have to be that. Don't think that we're constantly having to buy. Sometimes it's just affirming and acknowledging. We all know in the workplace how far it goes when anybody comes up to us and pats us on the back and says, "Hey, thanks so much. That was a great job. Really appreciate that." That goes so far, even if words of affirmation isn't our primary love language. Just that simple recognition. But we can add to that as well. So in the same thing that we need to be flexible with what are the negative consequences going to be, what are the positive consequences going to be? And then also, what am I trying to teach them in this, right? So when they lie, I mean, some of these might be basic principles in terms of what we think we're wanting to teach them, but what are some of those deeper things that we're trying to teach them? How do we see this being contrary? We talked about identity last week. How do we see what you just did, this disobedience, this defiance? How do we see that contradict your true identity of who you are in the Lord? There has to be this place of education. It can't just be, don't do this. It can't just be I'm guilty of this, the lazy parenting oftentimes because I said so. Right? Now, sometimes there is a place for that, right? Obedience. There is a time and a place for us to just trust obey God.
Just trust me. I want your good.
Yep.
Right.
And that can be the simple education point that we're trying to instill in that moment. but oftentimes, no, it's going to beg for more explanation to our sons and to our daughter. We have to do this repetitively also. Don't just think because you told your 14-year-old one time. How many? I have stopped doing this. I promise I have, because I made a conscientious decision. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but I stopped saying, how many times do I have to tell you? Because I couldn't stand...
Referencing the scoreboard, right?
I couldn't stand the flicks on the forehead that I was getting from the Holy Spirit of, Ben, how many times do I have to tell you? I couldn't deal with me looking into a mirror every time I was saying it. So we have to remember we're dealing with people that don't have fully developed brains. We're dealing with one of the things we're constantly going to try to teach them is the principle of what I do today affects me tomorrow.
And they can't necessarily biologically,
it's just
right?
not there. It just isn't there.
Yes.
And in the teenage years, that frontal part of the brain is in hyperactivity and way underdeveloped, right? So we're constantly teaching them, and we also have to realize we are playing the long game here, right? Parenting is not, like I always say it like this: you don't plant an apple seed today for an apple pie tomorrow, right?
That's right.
I gotta wait. I remember our oldest son. Our rule with social media. This is just don't take this as gospel. Every parent, you pray, you seek Lord on this. For us, it's at 16 they can have social media. But Snapchat it's a hard no for us. We don't do it, and we can get into that later. But I remember our oldest son trying to convince us and talk about the ways that his friends communicate and all this stuff. And that's fine. But he made the comment to me. He goes, "Hey, just give it to me for a month, and you'll see I won't get addicted to it." Because in his mind, that was our thought. And I looked at him and I said, "Buddy, I'm not worried about you a month from now. I'm worried about you 10 or 15 or 20 years from now." Right? It isn't just the immediate consequences. It's what's the long-term ramifications on your brain development. That's what I'm considering. That's what I'm thinking about. All right. So we have the E to educate, and then we have the A as attachment, right? So now this think of this especially with young children. That 2 or 3 year old that you just had to give them a little popping, right? You had to give them a little spanking because they crossed the street and defied you. Oftentimes what you see that the same hand that just had to toll out that discipline, they're now wanting to be comforted, right? That oftentimes they will lean in. Now they're going to step in, even though you should spank them. Now they're going to step in and need to be comforted by you. That's a sign of a healthy attachment. So we know that moms and dads are the primary attachment figures. So even in my correction, even in my discipline, even in my punishment, how am I still building and reestablishing that attachment that we have, right? And this can be even when they're teenagers. We've used the line, or we're familiar with the line of "this hurts me more than it hurts you," right? And none of us wanted to hear that. None of us really, as parents, if we're being honest, really want to say that, because we understand that feels disingenuous, but it's true.
Well, I would say that it isn't necessarily hurt. Maybe as sometimes it is hurt because of the disappointment, and even in some cases, depending upon what's been happening in the life of that child, it could be despair, for where we see that child headed.
Sure.
We don't want them to go down that road, and we're trying to stop them, but they continue. And it's hard.
Yep.
Because all of us at some level, no matter what we say, want to be liked. And when you discipline your children, especially the older they get, the period, that brief moment when they're 3, where they're upset that they got spanked, and then they look for the hug and they want to be comforted. When they're 13 or 15 or 17, that moment's longer.
Yep.
It's longer.
Yep.
And that's hard because hey, I'm about to levy this consequence. I'm going to take your vehicle, or I'm not going to let you park in the garage, or I'm going to take your phone, or, we're turning off the internet at home, whatever. I'm about to levy this consequence. And I know there's going to be a break in our relationship for a certain period of time. And that makes discipline really hard.
Sure.
Probably in a way that I did, as someone who unfortunately made plenty of mistakes as a teenager and at times was rebellious towards my parents. I know that's difficult for you to believe, but it is true. I know what it means to lie. And,
you all couldn't see me rolling my eyes.
Yes, that's right.
I remember my oldest son, we had to dole out some consequences, no, it was actually, we just didn't give him what he wanted, right? The answer was no. He didn't want to hear no. He wanted to hear yes, and he had his arguments, and he was convinced in his mind he was right, but we disagreed, and so he got up, he walked away, and I put my hand out to just give him a high five, right? Again, part of that is attachment. Part of that is, honestly, if I can be honest, just my own insecurity. I want my kids to like me.
Yeah, me too. Right? That's natural.
So I put my hand out. Well, he didn't give me a high five, right? He didn't do it. And my gut reaction, and I think I said to him, I was like, hey, get back here. But then I realized, wait a minute, he didn't do anything wrong. I put my hand out. He wasn't being disrespectful. He wasn't being dishonoring to me. He doesn't like the answer. He doesn't have to like it, right? Like it was okay for him in that moment to be frustrated, to be upset, to be hurt, whatever he was feeling. Now am I willing to let however much time goes, whether that's 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever, and then go kind of remind him and reestablish him of the attachment. And simple ways that we can do this, parents, is go and touch your children. Put your hand on their back. Put your arm around them. This is a way we use the word bless a lot of times in Southern culture. There are tangible, practical ways that we can be a blessing to one another, and specifically to our kids. A touch is a blessing to our kids. So go to them and just remind them, put your hand on them, and something, Taylor, you hear me say it every week at church, but you've heard me say it many times. A phrase my family is very, very familiar with hearing from me is, I love you and I like you, right? I want them to know, maybe I didn't like the behavior, but I never want them to have this moment where they hear from me, I love you, but I don't like you, right? The reason I don't like when parents say that, and certainly when husbands and wives don't say that to one another, but for kids is, if I say to my kid, I love you, but I don't always like you, well, we know what we're meaning by that is, I love you, but I don't like your actions. But what we just said was, I don't like you, right? And even when they're teenagers and they're so emotionally driven, they can't contextualize what you're saying and what you're meaning, right? What they just heard their parents say is, I don't like you. They're probably already dealing with their own insecurities of not being liked by this person or that person or this group, and now they're not even liked by their parents. And I've also said it like this: there's never been a moment in my life where I haven't felt both loved and liked by my Heavenly Father. Now, I know He doesn't like some of the things I do. That's a very different way of saying what you're meaning, right? I love you. I don't like this behavior you just did. I don't like that, but I love you. I like you because I know that's not truly who God created you to be.
Well, and I think for children, at every age, there is a sense of security with your parents, right?
There should be.
There should be, right? And so I think, and some children, unfortunately, aren't able to experience that safety and security. But there is this idea that, hey, my mom is going to be there. She is gonna love me. She's gonna like me. There's this sense of connection there that no matter what I do, my mom's gonna be there. And in the best of circumstances, children also feel that about their father. And when they don't have that, when that 14-year-old, it seems like for the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old, the 8-year-old, it comes a little bit more natural, maybe a little bit more quickly. Sure. But as that 15-year-old wants to go out and stand on her own 2 feet, or she wants to kind of figure it out on her own, that 17 or 18-year-old, that high school senior, is really kind of ready to,
Well, and we need to know this, and I'll move on, but attachment for moms and dads look a little bit different. Equal, but different.
That's a good point.
So attachments with moms are made the moment of conception, right?
Yes, because they carry the child, right? And that's
for dads, the attachment is established the moment they're born, right? Now, again, just as necessary, just as important, equal, but very different, right? And so, unfortunately, what dads have adopted oftentimes as a mentality is they are secondary to mom. They're not. I've seen this billboard before. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's a cute billboard. It's that character from Despicable Me, Gru, right? And the 3 little girls are climbing all over him, and he's got this really exacerbated look on his face. But The caption says, "Take time to be a dad today." It's beautiful. It's wonderful. The sad thing is you'll never see a billboard with a woman and kids climbing all over her where it says, "Take time to be a mom today," because moms don't need to be reminded to be a parent. Dads do, right? And so it's so important. It's so important that we reestablish constantly that attachment we have. So we have flexibility, we have educate, we have attachment, and the R is the reliability. And this goes back to what we were saying of, say what you mean what you say. Don't write checks with your mouth that you're not ready to cash. I'm guilty of this one, right? I mean, if we're like, dude, all right, fine, you're grounded for a month. Really?
You're going to have to walk that back.
Yeah. Am I really prepared for that? Hey, you're never getting your phone back again. Come on.
Well, the kid in that moment too knows.
Of course.
That is not happening.
And now they get to call your bluff.
Right. That's right.
Every single time they know now how to manipulate you, because they know, okay, the quicker that they already are born manipulative anyway. I know that because I'm born that way.
That's right.
And they're descendants of mine, right?
Correct.
So they're already going to look for a way to lessen or cheapen their punishment, their discipline. But I'm going to give them more reason when I start having to walk back this thing I just said. So what is my plan? What is my, and am I prepared to do that? And I also say this as parents, we have the right at any time to renegotiate the terms of the contract. And this goes back to that whole fear principle. I know for us, a rule we have is you can't have phones in your bedroom, right? You again, this goes back to I trust my kids. I don't trust their sin nature. You put me, a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, boy, in a room by myself.
With a device that can access the world.
Anything. Right? I know what I'm doing.
I will get in trouble, for sure.
So
absolutely.
So
that's right.
But I know that there's been, I wish we would have done that. You still can. You have the right at any time you want to renegotiate the terms of the contract.
I think the challenge there too is, do I embrace the concept that this is going to be better in the long term for my child? Like the momentary frustration that maybe can even last a couple days where the child is really upset with me, that's worse than being a
100%
high-functioning adult who loves the Lord with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yep. Yeah. So, and that goes both ways, right? I might have to walk it back and say, hey, that was too much. That was too heavy. Or I might have to walk back and be like, you know what? I've really thought about it. We actually need to turn the temperature up a little bit. We need to turn the volume up, because as we see this playing out and as we see consistent patterns with some of your behavior, we're really concerned about what this means in the long run. So here's what we're trying to eliminate in your life. Here's what we're trying to implement in your life. Here's what we want to see. It all ties together back with this education, with this attachment component, and even being flexible, right? Because we can't strategize for everything, but we can be developing strategies regularly, right? So let me just say this, because ideally all of this sounds great. This ideologically, this all sounds great. Pragmatically, now we fail, we mess up, and there might be a parent listening to this that they have these 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and they know that man, their time is so brief. And we can focus so much on the things we didn't do or the things we messed up with, right? And this is where I would say God's grace is sufficient. It is sufficient. Yes, there might have to be a little bit more correction, but we can't think for 1 second that the cross can't bridge that chasm, right? It's not like it's not like Jesus had the ability to raise a dead man or cause a blind man to see with mud, or pick up a guy's ear and slap it back on his face, but then look at you and your parent and be like, man, I don't know how I'm going to fix this one. I just don't know how I'm going to figure this one out, right? God's grace is sufficient. The other part with that is, like I said, when I was holding Connor when he's days old, at some point they have to make their faith their own, right? When Adam and Eve took the bite, God didn't say, and we're not God, please don't hear me say that, but God didn't say, well, shoot, what didn't I say to them? What did I do wrong? What did I miss here, right? We can't put all of their failures on us. At a certain point, they stand before the Lord too, and they're like your dad told you, he's an eternal soul. He gives an account for his life. And so yes, certainly we want to protect them, not just here on earth, but through eternity. And then I would also say this, because I know that there will be single parents listening to this, and I would just remind them as well, God's grace is sufficient. And God never intended you to play both roles. And so I can't even begin to imagine. I know the grief that can exist there. In fact, my dissertation was on the grief experience of divorced fathers with school-age and adolescent children. I know how heavy it can be. Don't think for 1 millisecond that God can't intervene and step in and empower you and equip you in ways you didn't know were possible, because His grace is sufficient.
Well, Pastor Ben, thank you so much for that just encouraging word that, even at the end, that His grace and mercy abounds, and so does His forgiveness, and His mercies are new every morning.
And I'll tell you, because I'm a few years older than you, I'm more grateful for that than you are.
Well,
His forgiveness. You'll get to where I'm at in a couple of years, and then I'll be ahead of you again.
That's right. Well, you'll always be ahead of me because you're older than me. So
it's true.
But I pray that each and every day we would remember that the sun comes up, and so does His mercy every day. Well, just as a final encouragement to our families, would you be willing to pray for our parents and our children here at the Academy and the church, and just even around the world?
Yep.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, the fact that we get to call you that, and then as parents we share a parenting title with you, it's grace upon grace. It's your favor. It's your kindness. It's your goodness. You didn't have to create us to be relationally driven and full of love. You could have made us robotic in that sense, and you're God. It would have been well within your right to do that, and yet you designed us and you created us with this capacity for this unending love. And I think oftentimes we know that, or we experience or feel that most as parents with our kids, because none of us can aptly define or measure the love that we have for our sons and our daughters. And so, God, we just say thank you. We thank you for entrusting them to us, and remind us that before our sons and our daughters are ours, they were yours. That these are sons and daughters of the risen King, and every single one of their days are already written in your book before one of them's come to be. You intricately designed them and wove them together. We didn't do that. You know them far better than we do. And so, God, I pray that you would give us insight into who they are as these eternal souls. God, you would give us wisdom, or that we would seek wisdom from you, first in our fear of you, in our awe of you, in our reverence of you. You would impart wisdom to us so that we know how to lead and raise your sons and your daughters into where you've called them to be. Lord, may we know your grace in our homes. God, I pray for every single home that is listening to this, and not just for this home, but for the generational homes beyond this, God, for the children of these homes, and then the children's children of these homes. Lord, may this have this eternal impact for your kingdom. God, we love you. We entrust our families to you in your wonderful, loving, precious name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Ben. Thanks for recording these episodes with us and challenging our families, but also encouraging us to help our children love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then to live a life that is transformed by that love. We thank you for listening. Hope you will subscribe, and we'll catch future episodes as we share more with our families about what's going on here at the Academy, and hopefully equip you to help raise your children in a way that is pleasing to the Lord. We look forward to seeing you on campus very soon.